Good evening, Internet. It is a Friday evening, and I am joined by my illustrious colleague, the IDPA shooter himself, Tony, the Grandmaster of the Glock 26 variety,
Everyone.
who's going to be sitting in on the podcast with us this evening. How are you, Tony?
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Doing well.
So, are you keeping up with what's going on with USPSA, or is
Very,
this
very lightly. Yeah.
very lightly? Okay. So there's a bit of drama that's going on with USPSA, and there's a bit to kind of talk about. So the first is that the presidential runoff is going to open up this weekend. So for those of you who are following along, the disgraced former president who tries to pick fights in Denny's parking lots, just kidding, that's an actual major match, is being replaced by one of two candidates. There is Bruce Wells, the area director from Area 6 down in the southeastern United States. And there is Yi Min Lin all the way across the country from California, who will be throwing his hat in the ring. So if you like I'm not going to tell you who to vote for or anything like that. However, if you like where USPSA has been, Bruce has been an area director for many years now and has a good feel for the way things are. Yi Min is a traveling range officer, been to a lot of matches, Yale educated, got a lot going on. So those are your choices. The voting opens up this weekend, and you can begin to pull the lever for your favorite guy. All right. And so the big news is that USPSA has suspended 4 members basically for online behavior. 2 of them are people with online footprints who I don't mind mentioning by name, at least one by name and the other by his Instagram channel profile, I guess you'd say. The first being Ben Steger, the former champion of production division, runs Practical Shooting Training Group, current IPSC world champion. So he and 3 other people have been suspended pending an investigation before the board on the status of their membership. The other gentleman who was sat down, put in timeout, is Practical Shooting Insights. It was an Instagram page that originally started with investigating suspicious classifiers and things like that. In my opinion, he began sort of believing his own marketing and got a little aggressive with the truth telling he felt compelled to do, and got to be one of the more toxic profiles. A lot of people like the fact he's shining a light on the org. A lot of people look at him as being toxic. It's highly polarizing, and you're going to come down where you come down on those depending on your opinion of how to use social media, I guess. If you care to throw in an opinion, feel free, or we'll just keep humming along. But there was a note posted by Bruce Gary on their Facebook page. Bruce Gary is the USPSA Area 1 director, and I'll just read it to you verbatim because it provides probably the best look behind the scenes. And we're going to finish this podcast with some constructive criticism of USPSA because regardless of what they did, how they did it is important. And I think that this was a pretty big misstep, regardless of how you feel about it. So Bruce Gary says, Area 1 peeps, I've seen the post on the Area 1 page and gotten a few emails. And since they all sort of cite the same talking points, I'll try to address them all at once. My perspective is simple. The job of an area director is to serve the best interest of the organization. That means dealing with problems, making decisions, and trying to implement changes, all with one important question in mind. Does this make USPSA better? I completely get that we're a community of alpha personalities. That's the part of what I like. There are a lot of strongly held opinions, and no 2 of us are ever going to agree on everything, and that's the nature of the beast. I don't mind if we disagree. Those that know me know that I'm always willing to have a conversation on any topic, and I listen to what I hear. Far more often than not, your perspectives influence mine when things hit the board table, as they should, as long as they make USPSA better. I'm always willing to take feedback, and if someone points out to me something we're doing wrong, I pay attention. It's part of trying to make USPSA better. So pointing out issues is totally fair, and bonus points if the person is invested enough in the issue to say, and here's how I think it could be fixed. I love that. And I don't care if people call me names. I find it usually comes from behind a keyboard from people I don't know. So I'm a BOC, whatever. I don't lose any sleep over it. I figure it's part of the job too. But when it gets past differing opinions and pointing out issues and calling me names and becomes something that has the potential to harm USPSA, I have to pay attention. That too is part of the job. I used to have the perspective that what people do at a USPSA match under USPSA rules is USPSA business, but what people do outside the range and on the internet is none of our business. The last couple of years have changed my thinking on that. What we've seen recently is people who have stated in writing and on podcasts that they're going to war with USPSA and that their goal is to burn it to the ground. As part of that quest, stating that they want to destroy the people currently serving the org. People who dig into the personal lives of the board members, trying to find dirt and flat out making stuff up if they can't find anything juicy. And most recently, people who are willing to dox, which publish the home address of people they don't agree with. What could possibly go wrong? None of that makes USPSA better. It's crossing the line from dissent to destruction. It's malicious, it's wrong, and it needs to stop. So that's where I am. I believe that if someone who wants to destroy USPSA and worse, cause harm to the people working to improve USPSA, they should not be a part of USPSA. A couple of notes to clear up some misperceptions. Number one, nobody has been banned. Suspending a member is a first step in a bylaws-driven process. The member has the right to address the board and give their side of the situation. At the end of that, the board has to make a decision. It could be that a suspension is lifted. It could be that the suspension is made permanent or anything in between. At the end of the day, the decision will be about whether or not the person has caused harm to the organization. That decision has not yet been made. If someone tells you they got banned for life this week, they're lying to you. Number two, several of the emails I've gotten have shouted freedom of speech. Yep, anyone can say anything they want. America. But having the freedom to say things does not mean the freedom from the repercussions. You absolutely have the right to go to your boss and call him or her an asshole. You have that freedom. He or she also has the right to fire you if he or she deems that having you around is no longer good for the company. So it goes. 3, and frankly, suspension with the right to a hearing is probably the most benign of the options available to us. Much of the stuff we've seen, screenshots are forever, rises, in my opinion, to the level of libel, which is defined as malicious and defamatory statements made in writing. Certainly, doxing someone has to be interpreted as a threat to personal safety. That's a big deal. I guess that's it for now. I'll leave the post up on the page, but if the comments get too sporty, I suspect the moderators will take it down. Up to you which direction it goes. The page is supposed to be a place where people can announce matches, post match videos, and, share the love of the game. At least that's the hope. For anyone who wants to, actually talk, send me an email and let's set up a time. My work schedule is stupid, but I'll make the time. I'm willing to hear your point of view. All I hope is that you're willing to hear mine too. So, Tony, I suspect that's the first time you've heard that or read that, since Facebook is for silly people, and you're not that silly of a person.
First time I've heard that. Yep.
How does that land with you?
Seems so. I don't know who even said it, right? You said
Area 1 director Bruce Gary. Yep.
Okay, so if I knew nothing about the situation, those words, this seems reasonable, right?
Right.
Comes across as reasonable. And this is from the perspective of a person just, mainly just shoots locals. I really don't care if it's under USPSA or, according to my StreamYard name, IDPA, right? Like, it's whatever is the most fun. That's the extent of what I care about the organization.
And that's the mainline opinion, ultimately. I mean, all of this bluster and nonsense that goes on, almost nobody knows about it at the matches. There's a very small sliver of the internet that keeps up with it. But the problem is that if you follow Instagram at all, the memes and all that stuff kind of spill over into it. So, I mean, with the way Instagram works, it pollutes your feed kind of whether you want to tune into it or not, because there are some non-meme pages that do post political USPSA memes all the time. They're usually terrible. Like, in fact, I would say 95 to 100% of the USPSA political memes are not as clever as the authors probably think they are.
But they're two hilarious ones. I mean, shout out to Tanfo Tenfo Timmy.
Oh,
Dude, he's
even
hilarious.
he is pretty
He's
funny.
so funny.
However, his political memes are usually pretty weak sauce, and it's not because I'm invested in like the other way. It's just like it's not that clever, man. Like you just wanted
Fair
to make a
enough.
meme because you feel like it's going on.
No,
But
I avoid the
he
political
usually
stuff.
does
Yeah.
a really good job. So, I mean, from what I know to be true, just from following the drama and
Sure.
listening to it unfold, I mean, yes, one of the board was doxxed, I believe, by the USPSA Insights person. A
Okay.
lot of people, I mean, nobody probably listening to this podcast listens to the Ben Steger podcast anymore, but you can go back for about the past year or so where he's basically, for the past 5 or 6 years, he has been grumbling, grousing, everyone on the board is dumb and I'm really smart. And that's kind of built up to the past year when he was trying to get Hopkins into the presidency.
Sure.
He went kind of super negative. And I would say that 50 to 75% of his podcast on shooting is now actually just on USPSA politics.
Okay.
And
well, I don't think, maybe I'm interpreting this all wrong, but I don't think there was kind of any sort of grand mastermind plan from Steger and his boys. It's one of those things where they're just merely pointing out the hypocrisy of the organization, right?
Right.
And they're just making comments, and I think those comments are being blown out of proportion.
I think they created an echo chamber and started
Yeah.
kind of feeding off each other, and it just kind of built and built. And don't get me wrong, like if you wanted a case study in organizational excellence, USPSA is not one to put a close eye to because they're doing a lot wrong. And we'll talk about some of the
Sure.
stuff just with that. With the result of doing this, I spoke with a section coordinator today about some of the gripes about the organization. So we'll end with some constructive criticism
Okay.
hurled out that way. But I mean, it brings up the question of like, should the org have the power to ban members like this for what they're doing on the internet? And this is something.
So when you say ban, do you mean suspend?
Suspend, yes. Oh, hold on. Let me edit it. Let's see. I can edit it. Here we go. I can change it from ban to suspend, but ultimately it could result in a ban. So I didn't even have to, but because we're dedicated to excellence in journalism, which is not at all what we're dedicated to, it matters. And so I originally thought about it and I was like, I don't know that I agree with it, but at the same time, when you really start to think from the position of the board, USPSA is a brand as well as an organization that ostensibly is supposed to serve its members. They have to find 1/7 of its membership every year to join just to stay in the same spot. Like and somebody who is creating an online media footprint that is tarnishing the brand. And I don't mean saying like, oh, things aren't going well, but I mean like wantonly having an agenda and going after them with a lot of the media that they're putting out. Like the Practical Shooting Insights page, 100% is just made to crap on USPSA. And Homeboy, I haven't read all of his posts, but most of the posts from him that I've seen almost never has solutions with what should be done other than
of course I would agree with that. Yeah, and this is all started, like, he's the same one as ZUSPSA, right? Like the original account. I was like ZUSPSA, then USPSA Insights, and then Practical Shooting Insights.
I do not know who ZUSPSA was. I've heard a lot of rumors as to who Z was. It's ranged from several high, profile shooters. One of the rumors was that it was Ben himself. I have no clue who it was. It happens to line up with the same brand of commentary that kind of corner of the internet is throwing out, but I don't know who it is. But at the same time,
from my brief understanding of the whole situation, it seemed as though it first started off as a kind of like a call to fairness, right? That there's certain things in the organization that is done with classifiers or whatever that's not fair. Maybe there's some potential cheaters, that kind of stuff. And then it was one of those things where, okay, let's revamp this process, or let's get rid of cheaters. And then it kind of evolved from there into terms of a more kind of pointed stick towards the organization itself, when they realized that the organization is not going to do anything about it. And it just kind of escalated there, because the organization, they're not going to respond to crap, right? They're going to say like, okay, yeah, cool, we'll look into it, and then next topic. But at the end of the day, the board members have no incentive to change anything.
Sure.
because they see it as, USPSA is growing, or it's has money flowing in, not really losing like too many members. And yeah, it's like she's gonna keep the status quo.
So the problem, and this comes from USPSA's approach to media, is that they can't advance any of their narrative. They're completely reactionary to whatever the echo chamber is happening to say. Jake Martins doesn't do a great job of publishing content that is interesting to USPSA shooters. Therefore, he cannot present the opinions of USPSA. So that's a problem. So you have people who are making media who are better at it than the organization is, and they're coloring the discussion and stilting it. But it'd be one thing if it's like, I love this game and I just want to improve it. But like that part is said like really, really quietly at the end. But the first bit of look how stupid they are, that bit is always kind of shouted and overemphasized. So it's difficult to prescribe good intentions to a lot of, but well, I won't speak to everybody. The other two people I don't really know anything about, but it's difficult to prescribe good intent or will to Stager and I'll just call him PSI.
Okay.
So it's difficult to prescribe good intent to them on actually wanting to improve things. Like they're absolutely trying to wreck things, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like they're doing anything constructive, which you could make an argument affects the valuation of the company if it reduces membership. And you can't say, well, how are they canceling members? But you can say, do you believe that through creating all this drama, it is causing people to not renew in the organization? And it's not that they're highlighting the thing, it's the frequency, pace, and just general tenor of their, I mean, Ben is posting stories on his Instagram a few times a week, if not every day, with more of this stuff. PSI, I mean, he really goes nuts. And PSI, he's not I don't know the guy personally, but I know that he put a post up that he sent an email to, and he told this on himself. If you go to his Instagram page, you can see this right now. He put up an Instagram post today where he sent a note to the president of USPSA that Jake Martins was bullying him because Jake Martins added him to all of his social media accounts, including his LinkedIn, and started liking posts, and he found that threatening. So that was really amusing to me, that that's the caliber of individual that we're dealing with who
it's a tough situation there, right? Because from PSI's perspective, he's an individual kind of criticizing an organization. So the resources that the organization has in terms of personal identifiable information is going to be different than what he has on them, for example. And so when the organization goes out of their way to look up the address of the PSI guy, right, and contact them and say, hey, you want to meet at the Starbucks or whatever, right? That's a little too far. So from the organization's perspective, they're saying that, from what I believe at least, they just wanted to hear, his side of the story or explain his side of the story. And so maybe they just thought that in their idea of the most effective way or most efficient way to do that is simply just to drive to that guy's like city and then say, hey, you want to have a chat, right? But I don't know, that seems, if we're taking Practical Shooting Insights account to be completely like true, then the organization kind of overstepped their bounds there. But if what he's saying is false, then yeah, I agree with you that
So people reach out to me on LinkedIn who I don't know and ask to have coffee on a fairly regular basis when they want to talk to me.
Sure, of course.
There is a somewhat adversarial relationship there, which the guy's obviously afraid of, and I recognize that. But at the same time, do you really think that a public personality is going to threaten violence to a member? I mean, but they have a lot to lose. Like Jake Martins is making over $100,000 a year on the org's money. If he were to go rough up a member, not only would he, the entire weight of the law would come down on him, he would lose his livelihood.
Yeah, but it's a matter of perspective, right? Like, sure, I can see both sides of the story.
Sure.
Right. I can see that Jake was kind of like, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna settle this man to man, and then I'm gonna get this over with. Right. I'm just gonna talk to the guy and see what's up. Right. And in his mind, he probably never considered that if he had to drive 5 hours to a different place to talk to the guy, maybe for him that's like normal. Right. But from PSI's perspective, he's like, this guy that is part of the organization that I'm having beef with. This person just messages me out of nowhere saying that, hey, I'm in your city. Let's grab coffee at this corner. Right? I'll be like, that's a little bit suspicious. So fundamentally, they can't have a conversation because they're both seeing it from a very, there's nothing to gain for each side, to be honest. Because in order for one side to benefit, the other side has to fall, right? So if you're in this situation, there's no one side wants to talk, one side doesn't want to talk. And the difference between, let's say, you and an employer reaching out and wanting to have a conversation is like, well, there might be a mutual benefit there. There is no mutual benefit between the organization and PSI.
Well, I would say that conversation isn't going to hurt anything. I mean, it's going to provide new information. And if the philosophy of a Instagram page that, the truth is going to make things better. I mean, there's things that they can say to him in person they cannot put in writing that perhaps would give him perspective that would probably blunt a lot of the material that he prepares on his website. But that does diminish his brand because a lot of his following is those kinds of people who want to hear that kind of stuff. I mean, as well as I do that social media thrives on outrage, and he had built quite a following of people who were upset with the organization, and he just kept throwing them rage bait all the time. Yeah. So I can see why he would say that, but I also don't think that he is of substantial character to engage when a conflict arises, yet he's very happy to create conflict. And
no, I mean, I can see it from your perspective too. And let me know if I'm wrong, but you're looking at it as like, well, this guy, PSI, has no issue kind of revealing confidential information or supposedly confidential information about board members or people with the organization, right? And then if he has some like juicy trivia or some sort of like drama gossip about these guys, then yeah, he would just publish it on his Instagram page under the veil of being anonymous. And the moment that that's kind of turned on him, then it's like, okay, well, I'm just an individual and I'm the victim here, right? So I guess I can see a little bit of the hypocrisy there. But regardless, it's still an individual versus an organization. And then there is certain boundaries that shouldn't be crossed in these cases. And
well,
I think that
it's I don't know that it's the organization reaching out like that. It's another individual who is the subject of criticism through his internet posts. So to me, it's just more of he's a keyboard warrior. I mean, at the end of the day, he is a keyboard commando, and he's all bluster, all hat, no cattle, if you will. So we're both Texans. But anyway, going off the deep end on that, I think it's well within their rights as far as protecting the brand of USPSA. I don't know that I love it, but I also know that I don't love the extended media campaigns that at least two of these individuals had engaged on. I mean, PSI did dox somebody effectively.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a no-no in the internet age. But I mean, it begs the next question is like, just because they do have the power is like, should they do it and will it achieve anything? And that's a tougher question to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think USPSA's best plan was just to say nothing from the very beginning. Them acknowledging it opened a can of worms that just kind of led to the situation now, right? But I guess the organization had nothing better to do, so they're like, we might as well do something, right? But if you were a busy organization, this stuff, you would just kind of like ignore it. It's like,
don't feed the trolls, right?
Yeah, don't feed the trolls, exactly. Just don't say anything. And from what I understand, I mean, it all started with just fairness on classifiers, and then that somehow steamrolled into
it goes back further. I would say that that's probably the second or third evolution of it. Like basically, Ben, despite being a grandmaster, you've not been in the game as long as I have.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Been after probably 8 to 9 months of the Foley presidency, started on this like Ben's character. If you go back and listen to the really old podcast, Ben's tenor and approach to putting Mike Foley in office and trying to get change from the organization was very constructive and very positive. 2016, early 2017 sort of era. And then something happened along the way where he immediately fell out of love with Mike Foley and sort of started going down this path that his recent kind of social engagement on the socials has been. And I mean, it is a years long campaign, but it really hit kind of a fever pitch around the time you're talking about when PSI, or originally USPSA, insights, but really it came down to the initial election and getting kind of set up with the new election. Like they had some leaked emails from the board and the USPSA account and stuff. And they did a very kind of QAnon sort of campaign to like, oh, it's a light is going to set us, the truth is going to set us free. And I mean, it was some real, like, I mean, the people that you are made fun of on the internet for using the internet poorly, like it was that tier of campaign. But more recently, PSI and Ben's kind of podcasts and Instagram posts and stories and all that kind of stuff has been sort of hugely toxic. But at the same time, so ostensibly, okay, we don't like this. This is causing us pain and harm.
Yeah.
So now the next step is we put them on a suspension. Is that going to reduce the amount of pain and harm it causes us? In the short term, yeah, to the organization. No. In the short term, assuredly not. It's going to get worse probably. But in the long term, will it?
You mean
you've cut off a pipeline? So I mean, PSI is a B-class open shooter. So he is probably not as invested in the sport. His ego is going to be kind of burned out, but eventually his attention is going to kind of fall somewhere else. He's not going to stick around that long unless he's just a super like neckbeard basement dweller kind of guy, which I don't think that he might be. I don't know. But Ben, I think, probably isn't going anywhere. He's heavily invested into the sport. His entire professional outlook is training people to shoot guns fast. And originally it was all USPSA, and now it's kind of branching over into the military side. So the question is, like, does Ben just kind of roll over and go away, assuming that he does get, indefinitely banned or whatever? Or is he going to lawyer up and come back hard at the org and, stop it?
Maybe I don't. Well, let's ask the fundamental question here, right? What makes USPSA actually valuable? And before you answer, I think the two things are this, right? The classifier system and the place where you can find consistently strong competitors in the sport of action pistol shooting, right? Now,
I would say it's this rule book that provides the framework for that to happen.
Sure, yeah. But so it's the strength of the rule books, but you can have IPSC at that point. Like what's the thing that's carrying USPSA is practice score. It's literally like if you had a score, paper, and pencil, like the score would not even be remotely where it is, right?
It used to be, Tony, you'd shoot a USPSA match and you were lucky to get the scores within a week. Like,
yeah, I mean, I shot with some homies, in a different country, and they scored paper and pencil. And I was like, no, I'm gonna bring you guys to like the 21st century. Like,
do you have a smartphone? Let me tell you the good news about our Lord and Savior practice score.
But yeah, I mean, it's the long term. So I think USPSA should consider, like, don't even consider this short term nonsense. Like at most, right? There's gonna be flack for a year or two. Right? Who cares? But where is the organization going to be in 20, 30 years, right? And in this situation where basically their entire product can be done on anything that can track scores, right? You just have to have some central database that can track how well people have been doing. Like, people love classifications, and if there was another organization that started up that had kind of like a similar level of things and had a rule set that was not always fluctuating and crap, right? Then I can see that being just as popular. And I think that right now IDPA is having a resurgence because they're willing to adapt. Yeah, and USPSA has kind of an issue with, they're going to have a crisis coming in like maybe 5 or so
so
years.
here's kind of my view on this whole thing as well. So USPSA's current organization is not built for scale. It was never conceived to be this 30,000+ member organization shooting thousands of matches a year. And as a result, the framework on how it is run is not enough to do everything that it's supposed to do. So what it tries to do, it does poorly in a lot of instances.
Well, they try to do too much is the issue, is what I'm trying to say. Because you look at countries like Russia, for example, right? They have more practical shooters than us. Their IPSC division is larger than USPSA. And so what do they do? They just, they have a president that runs it, right? The guy's a badass. He can shoot, both hands, like he's nuts. Anyway, from what I understand is that they just shoot. And if you have a complaint, like look at the rule book, right? Like the organization is just, there to like run things, but they don't go beyond. Whereas USPSA, they're trying to juggle too much crap. It's like at the end of the day, everyone's coming just to shoot, and that's it.
Of course.
Right? And so if you add any other noise beyond that, that's just you're doing too much at that point.
I don't disagree with some of what you said, but I also would suggest that there is some kind of corporate functions that USPSA are fundamentally not doing that they should be doing, because effectively the model of USPSA is a franchise, and they're giving like zero franchise support. So they're putting the entire identity of the brand into the hands of the match directors, to a lesser extent area and section coordinators, but really it's the match directors.
Yeah.
And as a former match director, let me tell you the amount of support we received from the organization. It was a big fat zero.
No, it's negative because you have to pay the fees.
Yeah, we pay fees. I mean, effectively, we get nothing other than a rule book to run our matches by, and some national slots. We would get like 4 or 5 national slots a year, and we were one of the biggest. We were one of the biggest USPSA clubs in our section. But I mean, to this whole point is in talking to a section coordinator, a communication plan. This is some pretty white hot stuff, and they knew this at the time they voted on it. The next step immediately should have been, okay, let's get a conference call set with all the section coordinators that's recorded, so anybody who's not there can listen to the recording and discuss, disclose to them prior to this going live what is happening, and goes out. So the section coordinators are armed, because section coordinators field these kinds of emails and deal with it. Section coordinators, and I mean, the next side of it is the membership. There is going to be obviously an uproar from one of the contingents that are view that they've been wronged in this on the internet. Somebody from USPSA, like a Sherwin, probably owed it to the members to basically read Bruce Gary's email in some form of official kind of communication, like this is going on, this is what it is. And it doesn't have to be as deep as what, Bruce's deal was. It's just effectively saying, like, the way we act online does affect the brand of USPSA. There have been some issues that have come up recently, and the board's going to be taking a look at those issues. Wanted you to be aware, hear from us, those kinds of things, and at least put a hand on the narrative a tiny little bit for how it's going to go. But I mean, communication is hugely, hugely important, and there's zero apparatus for that. And that boils down to kind of the support side as well, like going back to the franchise thing. Like, is there any sort of online training for a section coordinator and what a section coordinator is supposed to do? To my knowledge, no, there's not. Is there anything for match directors who are getting started? Like, is there a policies and procedures sort of guidebook for somebody who gets kind of plugged in? Because these are volunteer positions. People are basically giving up their free time to not get paid and put in a bunch of work that is largely thankless. And the organization is doing nothing to get out of its own way to support these people and make them be successful, kind of running their own little like mini USPSAs effectively. And we always whine about there's not enough volunteers in the sport, but the organization is doing almost nothing. I mean, they're probably doing stuff I'm not aware of, but almost nothing to support volunteers and helping them understand how they can be more effective at their job, transferring knowledge for what best practices are. Like, the entire point of a central organization should be, especially if it's volunteer run, to make life as easy as possible for the volunteers, and that's not happening right now.
Okay.
So I think that whoever the next guy is needs to have I think the board does lack a little bit of leadership because there are a lot of personalities, but there needs to be kind of somebody to say, these are what's really important. And this is how we need to be spending our mental energy and time and our finite resources in delivering the things that are going to, like, as the guys at TFB like to say, D plus effort that deliver B plus results. Like, focus on those things and get those things to happen. And I mean, in the age of technology, it's not a big ask for them to invest the time and effort to stand up those types of programs. They don't have to be anything elaborate. It could be a damn Word document or PDF. And it would probably go a long way towards helping people. But we don't have anything like that right now, because one of the section coordinators I was talking today got absolutely flooded with emails. And this is a guy with a lot going on. He's got plenty to do in his personal life, and he feels obligated to respond to the members of his section. And he has no official word from the organization, the what or why. So he's left kind of digging in, researching, figuring it out on his own, trying to make phone calls, getting a hold of his area connector. Like, that is really poor leadership from the organization. And the entire point of the organization is to provide guidance and leadership. Like, that's what it's there to do.
So what kind of questions is he fielding? Like, what kind of questions is he running into?
A lot of the questions are the ones you would kind of imagine, like, how on earth can you ban somebody for what they're saying on the internet? I thought this was America, free speech, like a lot of that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And that's, I mean, it's all predictable. A lot of it's probably loosely coordinated through people who are in the same group chats on Instagram. I'm not saying that it's like a coordinated campaign, but.
So in the bylaws, right, or in the rule book, it does say that the organization can suspend members.
100%.
Right? For
they have the power to do that.
Disrepute or something. Is that what they call it? Like, disrepute to the organization? It's like, okay, well, can you reasonably say that the conduct of PSI and Steger potentially could have brought disrepute? Sure. I think you can reasonably say, like, you can say that. Whether or not I agree with it, that's different, right? Different, I think that's what people are trying to change, is that, well, because they're their buddy or their idol or whatever, right, gets banned. It's like, well, I don't agree with that. So then automatically you're not gonna like the organization in that situation. So I don't really know how, like, in terms of a communication plan, right? Like, at the end of the day, if you put some rules down, it still depends on the people who are decide to kind of act on those rules. If you put those rules in place, but then the area coordinator doesn't really give a crap about answering the phone or whatever, then the section coordinator is in the same exact situation. Like, what does having a plan do? Nothing. Right? It comes down to individuals. It's a volunteer sport, like you said, and it still comes down to the individual effort in every position. And the whole thing, I guess the emphasis on this entire movement, right, is that, well, clearly the people at the top, it doesn't feel like they're doing their job. And the only way to fix this issue is to have a complete refresh of the organization. And I think that's what people want to see, is a refresh.
Sure.
Now, people who are in place, obviously, they don't want to lose their jobs. So they're gonna, like, make these excuses or reasonings on, why they deserve to keep their job, or why everyone else is wrong, right? But at the end of the day, it's like, no matter what they do, there's gonna be a certain population that says, we want this won't be solved until everything's done. Yeah. Or until everything gets refreshed, right? And
I don't disagree.
So it depends on where you fall on the spectrum. I think the silent majorities, people don't really care. They don't care who runs the organization, as long as they are able to shoot their USPSA matches, get their classifiers, and as long as their areas or their nationals, matches run relatively smoothly or whatever, right? Who cares? And that's I think the majority of the people that are shooting the sport.
Certainly, and I don't disagree with that. But at the same time, a proactive communication plan can stem a lot of those questions. If USPSA had the media presence to get in front of its membership and be able to deliver a message that addresses all of the talking points that are probably in, I would guess, probably 9/10 of the emails they're getting, it saves those section coordinators time. The board of director, I suspect everybody's got out their tiny little violins, feeling bad for it, but just saying, like, this, a lot of this is avoidable, and it's wasteful.
Exactly. But okay, the easiest solution is all of them go on a live stream, like go on StreamYard, for example. Just record like a 10-minute conversation, post it on YouTube. That's all you need to do, right? Like what's like I don't understand. Why can't we just have a quick Q&A? And then the whole thing is solved. But no, we're all gonna they're all gonna like, go behind their back rooms or whatever, right? And then have a conversation, ban this person, and then have lawyers involved. Like, why? The people simply want to ask, like questions, you answer them, or you answer them clearly too. Don't be like, oh yeah, we'll look into this, evaluate or whatever, right? Like, no, it's simple. People want to see justification for the salaries that you're getting. Explain yourself.
Oh, of course.
Simple as that, right? But no, they don't have incentive to do that because they know that if they if they do it, it's not going to look good for them.
Well, let me ask this question of you. So
sure,
they tried paying an executive salary to Foley as an executive versus this halftime guy that they're going to bring in who's kind of defanged and neutered by the board.
Okay.
I increasingly think that somebody who is on the hook and compensated highly to deliver results and should be accountable to those results. Like if you're not getting the results, then you don't need to be like, whether that's an executive director or a president or whatever form that happens to take. Like there is a skill set, an executive skill set that is not present at the board level. And I would say Foley was kind of sniffing around the right tree, sort of, kind of, but it's not there. I mean, a lot of this stuff is, but you're not going to attract good people to do that work without a financial incentive, because like if you want a really switched on executive type, it's probably somebody who's in the height of their career and you're asking them to do a job. Like Phil Strader, I had him on the podcast about a year ago. He was paid, I think it was like 30 grand a year or something. It was not a lot of money for what was supposed to be a part-time job.
How many peanuts can you buy with 30 grand? Like
it took him 40 hours a week in a slow week to do the job.
Yeah, that's no good. Yeah. Well, I mean, so here's the thing. Do you want a president who's kind of like really proactive, that's doing a lot, has a lot of presence, or do you want more of a Calvin Coolidge kind of vibe, right? Where everything runs smoothly, but you just don't really hear about it?
So I think you need a presence. It doesn't have to be the president. It could be, you could be a Calvin Coolidge, but then somebody like your DME needs to be somebody who can be the face, the spokesperson, the press secretary, if you will. Yeah. You need somebody with charisma who can talk to a camera, who understands media, to do those kinds of things, because there's value in it. Like effectively, you're creating a brand and you need a face of that brand. And I mean, even if he's not the guy pulling the levers, then that guy is still going to create value for the organization. Like if you watch any of the media that Jake is on or Troy is on, they're not that guy. Like they don't know how to talk to cameras. They don't know how to produce interesting content. Like,
they might be the wrong generation.
No, that's kind of where we're at. This is kind of a generational shift. And I was kind of building up to this point, but we kind of got sidetracked. But with this whole Ben Steger thing is like the organization is on the cusp of reinventing itself because it kind of has to. Consumer tastes have changed. What we identified as sort of the big divisions are in question right now is, did we get that formula right? What is the organization going to be? How is it going to have its online presence? What is a way that, using technology, we can provide a more meaningful experience to the members? Like we've got an app and all this other kind of stuff. Like there's a lot of cool stuff we could be doing that we're straight not doing with technology. So you've got Ben Steger, who's kind of championing, like he wants to change things, but at the same time, the perception of him is he's a stupid production shooter and production is dead anyway. So why listen to what he has to say? And I'm not saying that as my personal opinion, but it is like a lot of the things that he goes to the mat for are effectively a return to form of what USP sort of used to be. But if the problem is USPSA isn't what it needs to be now, then that's like, it's almost like a regressive sort of position.
Sure. No, I mean, if you look back historically, you can see it from his stance on carry optics. Like when first carry optics was introduced or announced or whatever, right? He thought that was the worst idea ever. And a lot of people did. A lot of people thought this was the dumbest idea ever. right? Like the odds are fat or whatever, or it's not going to be a good division. And now it's the most popular division by far, right? So it's one of those things where I don't really care too much about what people would say or their opinion would say before something happens, because humans are not really good at predicting things, right? So I don't really hold it against them. But the question is, if you want leadership that's open to change, or do you want leadership that wants to keep the status quo? And I think everyone is going to have a different opinion on that, and that's okay. But I guess look at it from a perspective of, like, if you weren't invested in USPSA and you're invested in the idea of practical shooting in general, right? Just think of it, think of it inside a USPSA bubble, but think about, how do I make practical shooting as good as possible in the United States of America, right? Like, what would you change? Like, what there's certain things that, by being stuck to USPSA, you're kind of anchored to certain ideals, right? And I guess what's already there, the infrastructure that's already built around it. But if you could improve practical shooting in general, right? Because you want to grow this sport. I think you are a person that wants to see this sport grow as big as possible. And I think that in order to do that, you can't play in the confines of USPSA. You have to start your own stuff. But yeah, that's kind of a tangent conversation.
I don't disagree. But I think that whatever form practical shooting takes to really sort of elevate it to be more of a, I don't know what you would even call it, more of a professional endeavor, there has to be more money in it. It can't be on the backs of volunteers. And the only way to get more money in it this day and age with this kind of model without absolutely insane match fees would be to deliver a product that is scalable enough that has an online footprint that is outward facing. Because right now, USPSA's online footprint is entirely like navel gazing. It is absolutely inward focused. And while that is what's supposed to serve the members, like, you could take another stance and say, through doing this outward facing stuff, like a really easy small example would be, should we only, like, Jake Martins was on the Brian Connolly Behind the Lens podcast and said that he will only review guns from gun manufacturers who sponsor matches for USPSA. And he puts his stuff in the USPSA magazine. That's circulated to maybe 30,000 people who don't read it. Like, nobody reads it, and they already own guns. Like, that's not providing value to the sponsor. It's not providing value to the member. But in his mind, it is. Whereas that is a highly, like a Walter Q5SF or something, that is a searchable term that somebody who doesn't know about USPSA or practical shooting in general would probably, if they're interested in that gun, would like to know about. And putting the content in a place where it could be found by those people all of a sudden is generating eyeballs that it didn't before. Like, I work with media, just to finish the point. I work with the major gun brands because I have a sizable online following, and I get to go to things that are absolutely stupid for just some dude who has a large, small YouTube channel.
A legitimate media enterprise.
That's right. Nothing but legitimate media. So and that I'm just one guy, and they're an organization with, brand behind them. They've got major backing, major recognition amongst industry partners. If they decided to make a go of it, they could create a product, which is their sport, presented in an interesting, engaging online format that would engage corporate sponsors like USCCA, gun safe companies. There's a number of companies that would pay to sponsor it. And the whole point of paying is because now you can pay people to build matches, people to tear down matches, potentially even people to reset matches. And it becomes more of a professional endeavor without absolutely soaking the competitors. And I mean, at some point, maybe match fees do go up because the experience is elevated in such a way that, like, it justifies it. But I mean, with right now, like, you're resetting your own targets and all this kind of stuff. Like, it's not really, like, a $300 nationals is still kind of steep considering the experience that you get versus the match fee that you pay as the attendee. So
the nationals, the only appeal of nationals is to see where you rank, right, with your fellow competitors. That's it.
Oh yeah.
But obviously we would, if there was product A, product B, and one had, it was the same exact thing, but then one had you just shoot and you didn't have to pace or anything, then I think most people will take that option. But I think the whole kind of, like, if the best way to do it is if you had a large injection of cash, kind of, you just, let's say you had $10 million, right? If you were to start your own kind of practice shooting and make it as popular as possible with $10 million, like, what would you do, right? And I think a good starting point would be to figure out how much money do you need to actually get all the materials to build like stages. And do you know how much it costs? Because you used to run matches.
Yeah, for the North
for one
Texas
stage.
Open,
Okay.
for as far as how much it actually costs, I mean, it's probably $40, and if you're including like the cost of like all the target stands and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, let's say you buy all the target stands, buy all the sticks, buy the walls.
I mean, a wall segment, I think we had a local guy who welded the walls together, and I think we were paying like $50 an 8-foot section of wall, which was an absolute steal because like he was basically charging us for material. So we have steel walls, and it's about $50 he's charging the club. I mean, each target stand is about, depending on how you source it, call it $30. Okay. And each one of those sticks is probably, round up to $5. It's not like per pair of sticks, and each target's about $1. So depending on the
reason why we're doing this thought exercise, right? You said that the organization itself it loses 1/7 of its members every year, right? So what happens if there was an alternative that existed where, do you think you can, with all the materials, it's like $1,000 per stage, let's say? Let's round really high.
Keep talking. I'll run the calculation real quick.
So imagine, I'm just going to pull numbers out of my ass. Imagine it costs $1,000 to have a combination of things where you can build a stage however you like, and then the average local, will have 6 stages.
Probably $1,500 a stage. If you have a couple pieces of stage,
$10,000 in materials. Yeah, $10,000 in materials for an entire club. Now, what if there was, you got an injection of $10 million, you have packages of $10,000 of just, materials to build your stages however you like, and you just ship these packages to every, like, the top 50 clubs in the United States. So 50 times 10,000, that's $500,000. Let's double that. Let's round it. Let's say $1 million.
$1 million bucks, yeah.
$1 million bucks to do this, right? And then now you know for a fact that these clubs that you sent your shit to has exactly the materials needed to build the stages that you want to build. And then all you do as a central authority is that you just come out with stages every month or whatever, right? Or every like twice a month or something. And then you essentially have postal matches that go on every single month. And you have standardized equipment, so everything fits. You know that everyone can have the same crap. And there you go. That's like, how much money does USPSA have in the bank, right? So I'm like, there's a few things, obviously, there's not factoring cost of setup and a lot of other stuff, right? But let's multiply that by another 5, right? $5 million to do this crap. For an organization, that's not that hard. But then these things, but they spend money on random crap. And I think just that, besides, like, if you were a local shooter, what connection do you have to another club that's nearby? Like, none, right?
Let me throw something else at you that is potentially, like, let's thought exercise time here. This is not David making stuff up. So, like, Phil Strader, talked about him earlier in the podcast, former USPSA president, now sits with SIG. Let's decide SIG decides they want to spend marketing dollars.
Sure.
They come up with some kind of mechanism, because, like, what's the upside for SIG about doing some kind of shooting matches to raise awareness of their products and promote people to use their products to try and to compete in whatever the thing would need to be. So how do you do that? Well, there's the format that we've talked about previously, which is a match, like with practical shooting stuff, very much like USPSA. What if there was like a qualification requirement that required you to post on, like, Instagram, record a set drill at a set distance and post your score or whatever, using a 6-hour thing, tagging 6 hours, something like that, so that you are using the network effect of social media to its fullest extent to maximize the set of eyeballs. It's not just everybody who shot that match and has 100 followers on Instagram posting their match video. It's like everybody who's at all interested in it, and it's something that could be easily set up at any outdoor gun range with 2 or 3 target stands, where it is just a basic drill, and that gets you an invitation to the next level, which could be like a proper match.
Okay.
And they do that, and they actually do some of the media production as well. So there is like a shooter experience, and I mean, it could be with their own camera crews and stuff like that, where, I mean, imagine how flattering it is to your ego, where I got invited to the SIG Invitational, and I have the option of purchasing my match video from them for $100, and I can post it on social media where I look like a screaming badass to all my friends, using effectively assuming that if SIG were doing it, you'd have to be shooting a SIG. Let's assume that.
Yeah.
So SIG is getting paid to cover their costs on the media production, and they are effectively set, like, it's the entire Red Bull model. Like, if you follow Red Bull, they put on these huge free events everywhere and just get a ton of people to come because they know everyone's going to have their phones up videoing it and posting it to social media to say how cool it is. And there is the Red Bull logo everywhere.
Yeah.
And you could do that same kind of thing with practical shooting, potentially. I mean, obviously you need a framework and rules as a sport, but that is like a more organic approach to using the power of social media. You don't need network coverage or anything like that. It can be entirely grassroots and still reach a lot of eyeballs that it wouldn't see otherwise. Because, I mean, each person who would post one of those types of videos for SIG, their cousins might see it on their Facebook. I mean, shit, it could be anybody. And, I mean, that could introduce people to the product who didn't know about it otherwise. So there's a lot of stuff we could be doing. We're devoted to this model of like, this is the way things have always been. And I'm not suggesting that it probably is getting the best results. I mean, we are getting some very good stuff, but I mean, we don't even, oh, look, we got a lovechat.xyz best adult dating site is now hanging tough in the chat. Let's block user. There we go. There we go. Lovechat.xyz is now blocked. So, yeah, there's a lot. If the goal is to put on the best practical shooting thing, but like an entire being introverted versus extroverted, we need to have a much more extroverted position if we're truly devoted to excellence, because like money can go a long way towards making some cool stuff happen. Like you go to a major match and you see these props that your club can't afford. It's just like, dude, that's like the first time you shoot a Texas Star, it's like, oh my gosh, it's a Texas Star. That's like, I don't know, $1,500 if you buy it from one of these websites. I mean, it creates an experience, and it is the experience that people are showing up for. I mean, it's the pursuit for competing, but like the reason people are showing up to the match is for the experience. And I would say that we fall really, really short on shooter experience right now. Like, how do you make a better shooter experience? Well, the person needs to feel empowered, like they did something really awesome. If they have some kind of piece of media that they can brag to their friends about, that's to the good. If they feel that they've learned something, or if they like using 6 Hour, they've got the 6 Hour Academy. Let's assume that there is a 6 Hour Academy at these big matches. They do these invitationals. They send their, range officer instructor guys or whatever they're called out to these matches to go interface with the dudes, maybe put on a short kind of like seminar sort of thing at the beginning of the class, like, or just an experience where there's so many positive check marks. Like, this was amazing. I would pay twice as much to do it. Yeah. I want to tell everybody about it. And we're not doing that. It's like, we have this consumer mindset. We're lucky if people post video to social media. Okay. And we're in the media that we're producing as USPSA finds nobody, because it's made for 30,000 people who don't read the magazine. And that's all we really have is the magazine.
Well, so along those lines, like if I was SIG, we'll do like a Nationals P320 match, right? Where the thing is, you show up to the match. So I'm going to bypass the first 90% and I'll do the 10% of the experience first, and I'll go back to it later. But you show up to this match, and imagine on check-in, they have a box for you, right? A 320 straight from the factory. And you have to use that exact gun for the match, right? And so like everyone's in the same boat.
Say like an MHS type handgun.
What is an MHS?
That is the Army's XM17.
Yes. Yeah, something like that. Okay.
It's after dark now, so now our voices are full of bass and our mouths are very close to the microphone.
Gotta be careful with that.
This is an ASMR stream now.
Yeah. And so yeah, imagine you show up to a match, or like the SIG event or whatever, right? And then you're forced to use the pistol that's given to you, right? And if it jams, it jams. Who cares, right? But at the end of the day, you use the same pistol and then you compete with it. And so, and the entrance fee is going to be free. Now, this is going to be crazy, right? It's going to be free to enter, but you have to like do the qualifications, like you said, in order to get to this match, right? So it's either you post on Instagram, whatever, doing a build drill, I don't know, something simple. But then you have this giant match, and let's say the prize is something ridiculous. It's SIG, right? So let's say $500,000 if you win first, right? Imagine if they only did that, how many people would all of a sudden buy P320s just to train on it, right? And then, so you have a bunch of people who buy a bunch of guns, and now you have in the firearms world, like, oh man, did you hear like SIG is having a $500,000 first place and prize takes all kind of thing? Like then you just have random people show up, and so yeah, there's many things that could be done, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the accountants and whether or not someone's going to sign off on it. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's just do something crazy, right?
I think like just playing it out further, like SIG has a professional shooting team of very good shooters. Like Lena is very good with the PCC.
Yep.
Max is a friggin' monster, and Daniel Horner is similarly probably not human. Imagine if there were like, okay, so if you had the invitational, that's a level 1 match, and then they have the level 2 match, which is your placement in the level 1 match would get you invited to sort of the next level.
Yeah.
And at some point you're competing against the SIG people for like mega prize dollars. So if you can beat Max Michel, you get $100,000, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Something absolutely crazy, because I mean, there are very few people on earth who can beat Max Michel, and probably not with a P320. Like they're probably not a P320 shooter already, but
yeah.
I mean, from SIG's perspective as well, maybe you do open it up once you kind of get to that level where you have to do the level 1 match with it. But at the level 2 match, you can use whatever gun you want. Max is going to use a P320. And if Max can beat you with his gun.
I think from SIG's perspective, they don't want the possibility of losing to a non-SIG gun. So they probably just keep P320 the rest of the way.
Yeah, it's probably fair. But at the same time, like, we always cry about how the fact that there is no, like, just using the P320. So having these fire control units being an interesting sort of thing, like, whatever you want to wrap the fire control unit for P320, that's one division. Like maybe it's dots, maybe it's irons, whatever it is. You could then have a P365 division as well, because the big gripe across the board is nobody competes with their actual carry guns. And
wait, you guys don't?
Well, yeah, except for I forgot who I was talking to, Mr. Glock 26 over there. But at the same time, a Glock 26 is a shit carry gun. But
I mean, I agree. That's why I use it. It's the shit.
I didn't say it was not a great competition gun. It's just it's a stupid little brick that makes your belt stick out like a solid inch and a half.
It's not easy to conceal, even though it's small.
Yeah, so I don't know. There's a lot of really cool opportunities if you were a first-party manufacturer like a 6 Hour to do something.
Yeah.
Really
I think SIG is in the best situation or the best position to do something like that.
They understand media the best. I mean, if you go to all of the Instagram profiles and social media pages of all the other brands, SIG is actually like routinely publishing videos about their products. And I mean, they're doing stuff like they're even taking it to the next level. Like they gave Gina Carano a P365 at Terrence Butler's range in California. And they're doing like entertainment type pieces and stuff now as well, which is nobody else is doing that.
Yeah, because I mean, how much does it cost to run a booth like of Sig Sauer stature at SHOT Show?
$2 million.
Like it's $2 million, right? Like because I feel as though if I was SIG, I would have a match at the SIG Academy or like near the SIG Academy or whatever, right? And you just introduce all your products there. Like, can you imagine if you show up to this match and they introduce a new gun and then you have to use that new gun? That'd be crazy. But you can have someone like, Lear Grandis make up the rules. Dude's a genius, right? About the stuff, and like he'll make it fair. And yeah, just just roll the dice and see how it goes. But I think that'll be more productive than a $2 million booth at SHOT Show.
Oh, 100%. And you can look at, I mean, I've gotten to be the benefactor of SIG not going to SHOT this year because SIG has done a number of like private media engagements throughout the year. Like when they did the P322 launch, there's some other products that they're launching. They had their SIG Days events. They did one in the spring in Arizona. I think they're doing one in the fall in New Hampshire. So they're doing media events, and they're doing it in a way that it makes a hell of a lot of sense because nobody else is breaking news on releasing new models. Like everybody blows their wad if they're at SHOT Show, and you're competing for eyeballs with everybody else at the show. And things like, we'll just wait another 6 weeks, and then we'll just, blow people away with our product offerings. And I would not be surprised at all, even if SIG does decide to go back there. But like, media has changed fundamentally, and SIG understands how to use it, and nobody else does. So they've got a huge inside lane. I'm actually filming a video this weekend talking about in 5 years, like, okay, people who grew up in the 70s and 80s, well, if you ask them to draw a gun, they drew a revolver. People who grew up in the 80s, 90s, you ask them to draw a gun, they're going to draw a Glock. People who are growing up now, you ask them to draw a gun, it's going to be a P320 or P365.
I can see what you mean.
And just because they're vertically integrated, I mean, I got to go on a factory tour a couple weeks ago on one of these media events that they were doing. I believe I understand their business model now, and nobody else is doing it. And it's going to create momentum. It's just going to snowball. Like, it's going to be SIG isn't like, it's another form of a Glock. Like when they released the P320, like that was okay. Here's our entrance as a Glock, but now, okay, we've got a tungsten infused polymer frame. Okay, we have a patent pending slide cut that it acts as a compensator that makes a little baby skinny gun shoot like a much more manageable, bigger gun.
Yeah,
we took a 6-round gun and now it holds 10 rounds. They're going to do stuff with their fire control units that, like, I thought the modular chassis thing was stupid. Like, why not just buy another gun? It costs the same damn amount. But at some point, you don't want to add more boxes to your closet. It's a hell of a lot easier to just get a grip module or a new slide. Yeah, I mean, that's a much smaller thing.
Yeah, I think the P320 is the best striker platform out there right now. Like, might even argue best platform out there right now in terms of competition.
So I'm going to do a video on the MHS handgun. I learned about the testing protocol and how they did it. For the people who are watching and listening now, I'll spill the beans on it. But those guns have to be mass produced in such a way that they can shoot a 2.85 inch group at, it's either 25 meters, 25 yards. I can't remember. Out of the box.
Would it be yards? Wouldn't it? Because that wouldn't make any sense if it was like the group was measured in
inches. All of the group is measured in maybe that, I don't know, but at the same time, so all of them have to do it out of the box. It's not a very big feat. So this is how they tested the guns. Is they took 10 of them, they go to the range, they make each gun do that. So SIG came up with a fixture like a ransom rest that had like laser sighted the gun precisely and could do it. And all the guns are actually sub 2-inch guns for the MHS hand guns. They're like a 1.85 inch group is the average group that they're shooting, which actually is pretty good.
Yeah, for a pistol, that's sick.
It's pretty damn good. So then they would take all 10 guns apart, field strip them, swap all the parts around, and make 10 new permutations of guns, and they still have to shoot that same accuracy standard. And they did that, I don't know how many times. I seem to recall the number being 10. I'm going to get my facts straight on this. Did it 10 times. Then they put the guns back together, shot 12,000 rounds to the damn things. Then they had to hit the same accuracy standard again at the end of the drill. And they do. And they can have a mean round between stoppage of 1 per 2,200 rounds.
Okay. A
typical batch would have across all the guns 0 to 2. Like, between all of them. So it's just, they're really, 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 I mean, they're not going to excite you in the way that if I hand you a new Infinity and you're going to be like, but they are a technological achievement because you can hand a P320 to just about any new shooter and they're going to be able to hit the center of the target almost immediately because the way the grip is shaped and how the trigger reach is set up, it's very intuitive to be able to point and shoot. Whereas a Glock, you have to learn how to hold it correctly. And a lot of people who've shot Glocks for a long time just drift their sights because they still can't shoot them straight. So and when you see the machines, and I got video of all the machines making the damn things, like they have a clean room with 6 or 8 of these $1 million machines that just takes one slide off of each machine that's cutting slides. And it just runs this little like feeler gauge down to some obscenely precise number. And it's not measuring if the part is in spec or out of spec. It's scanning the cut to understand when the tool needs to change on that machine, because they're all within spec because the machines are stupid precise. The guys assembling the guns have all the go, no-go gauges to make sure that, stuff is in spec or whatever. But like the machine work that they have, they run 3 shifts. They're making 6,000 guns a day. About 800 of that is rifles. Everything else is handguns. About 80% of that is probably the P320 65 type guns. So, I mean, at this point, nobody's going to come close to doing what SIG is doing, in my opinion. I've not been to like a bunch of other gun companies, but it's just, they've got the military contracts figured out. They've got the civilian market figured out in a way I would say that nobody else does. And, it's exciting to see that all this crap is being produced in America as well. Like, we're not supposed to be manufacturing anything. All the small parts, those are sourced internationally. But the frames and slides are made generally here in America.
I think SIG is doing it right, like as best as any, you possibly like imagine, I guess.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not a terribly exciting design, but it's extremely effective. And
no, I mean, if you've ever looked at the striker of a P320, it's immaculate. Like the amount of skeletonizing.
Pulled one out. Okay.
It looks. Can I actually pull it on stream?
Yeah,
I mean, I got a striker like way back there.
Oh no! Yeah, no. You've got a P320. Oh, I didn't realize. You do. You got an.
I switched to P320.
Okay.
My left hand shoots solely P320s.
Nothing
before what I just said is false. Yeah, I mean, I shoot P320s only now.
Yeah, right on, dude.
Yeah.
Well, Tony, this has been a fun conversation. I appreciate you taking time out of your Friday night to jump in and talk to us about the exciting world.
To be honest.
Yeah. Well, if in my case, the kids are in bed at this point, so it's like every night. But you're a young strapping man. You could go out and paint the town red. And you chose to be here with us talking about USPSA neckbeard stuff.
Do we have any questions, or are you?
You want to see? Let's go through the.
Why not? I don't think there are any, but
let's see. I don't think much of it was posed as questions.
Just like comments, like, "Oh, this guy has no idea what he's talking about."
I mean, it's just a lot of people having their own side conversations with what it would be. There was a note from where to go. The CBAS guys talking about growth and all this kind of stuff, speaking specifically to the volunteers and how to get that squared. And the answer to that is money. Pay people.
Yeah, it all comes from you need an injection of money. Like if you want to, you just need money. It comes down to that, right?
Yeah, but at the same time, I think if you're doing something truly excellent, you can create an environment which people want to take part, even if there is little to no money. I would say that we're not doing that right now. And if you look at your local clubs, the ones that are run really well have a lot of volunteers because they want to be a part of something that's awesome. So the clubs that are kind of marginal are always the ones crying about that. So if you're a match director and you're having a hard time finding volunteers, take a really hard look at what you're doing in your match. Go shoot some other matches and see, are you one of the best ones in your area or not? And if the answer is no, start taking steps to become that. Make it something you can be proud of and people be proud to be a part of because it is the best in the area. And usually that drives volunteerism in a way that it's tough to do. Like a free match fee doesn't go that far this day and age. Considering how much ammo costs.
Free
ammo would go a lot further, but that's also a lot more expensive at this point. But $30 match or whatever it is to spend $100 in ammo, whatever it is. So right on, buddy. Well, I think that's a good place to call it. So I appreciate everybody jumping in, chatting with us. This will be posted on my podcast feed. And if you're listening to this on my podcast feed, if you follow my alternate channel, The Arrogant Marksman. You can watch these kinds of events live. I have absolutely no kind of schedule routine when they go. So you just have to check your YouTube app for announcements, because it's 2:00 today. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a podcast tonight. And then Tony was gracious enough to join us. So
Thank you
again,
for inviting
Tony.
me. Yeah.
All right, guys. We'll catch you on the next one.
Peace out.